Where else to begin but Brighton and Hove Albion 4, 1 Chelsea, John. De Zerbi finally getting his first victory with Brighton. An impressive game, wasn't it? Did you enjoy it?
I did. I am a big fan of Roberto De Zerbi because I have to play up to my hipster credentials. So yeah, nice to see him doing well. It will be great to see him have a good career at Brighton. I'm looking forward to seeing the ideas that he likes to put up across in his teams slowly coming through.
Have we started to see those yet, do you think? Because, you know, it's been a little bit of a rough start for him. And it's hard. It's always hard, you know, when a new manager arrives, particularly at a club. Quite an unusual thing when a good manager leaves when the team are doing well. That's not that common, to be honest, these days. And replacing them with another good manager, sometimes you think it might take a little bit longer to start to see those ideas come through. Or what of Potter's stuff that De Zerbi keeps, what he wants to change. Have you noticed any sort of significant changes yet?
Yeah, I mean, both managers are similar in respect to the fact that they're both going to try and build up in certain situations. Now, the way that they're going to build up is different times. De Zerbi is famous for really overloading the deeper areas when he wants to build up. But again, I would describe both managers as sort of problem solvers in that sense, that they're going to see opposition presses as a problem to be solved, and they're going to think of creative ways of doing that. So there is that similarity there between the way that the two of them play. And we did see that happening in this game against Chelsea, but I thought Brighton were really quite direct in this game. So they were building up, but they were trying to get forward as quickly as possible, trying to get the ball into wide areas to I guess, get into the spaces behind the Chelsea wing-backs. And yeah, it worked out quite well. I mean, there's an element of luck insofar as, I mean, they got the goal very early on, so Trossard scored in about 5 minutes, I think. And then they got an own goal from a corner from Ruben Loftus-Cheek. So, and that was 15 minutes-ish. And so Chelsea were 2-0 down very quickly in the proceedings. And I think it was just tough for them to really get back after this. And I've seen a few Chelsea fans online actually talking about how when Chelsea do go behind like that with this squad, it does feel as though they do sort of roll over a little bit. So I suspect a lot of this comes down to the fact that there was those 2 goals early on, which really put them in the driving seat. There was another own goal later on actually, and I think I'm right in saying that until Pascal Gross scored in injury time, pretty much all of the goals that had been scored for De Zerbi at Brighton had been either Leandro Trossard or own goals.
Yeah, I think the first 5 were all Trossard, weren't they? Yeah,
who's having an absolutely banging season right now, actually. So he's a long-term love interest of mine. So it's nice to see him doing well.
I loved his first goal, the calmness to sort of take it around the goalkeeper, and then although you would imagine shooting on an empty net is straightforward when there's 2 big defenders in the way, him hitting it, you know, into the sort of far post and in was great. Seb, as well as Brighton played, Chelsea, they just seemed kind of all over the place. Thiago Silva made a couple of amazing, goal line clearances early on, but it was real sort of edge of the seat stuff. They looked a little soft.
I think I'd use the word sloppy, Joe. So the Thiago Silva clearance you referenced actually came from a really bad mistake by him. So depending on which camera angle you can find, he's trying to play out from just the edge of his own box, and it's really difficult to see who he's aiming at. He chops his pass out sort of diagonally right, leaves it short, and that's the move from which he has to make the clearance. Ordinarily, when that kind of thing happens, you see, I mean, it can galvanize the team. People go, "Oh, come on, we're away here. We don't want to get under the pump and find ourselves in a hole." And yet Chelsea never really switched gears even after that. It felt like one of those games in which, once Brighton, I don't know, there was no, I'm running the risk of sounding a little bit Graham Sounessy here. And I don't want to use the phrase wanted it more, really trying to edge around it. But it was one of those kind of things. If you look in that first 20 minutes at some of the 50-50s, some of the tackles, some of the intensity, Brighton win absolutely everything. And at the time, it feels a little bit inconsequential because you're waiting for Chelsea to play their way into the game. But all of the direct moments that John talked about feel like, Brighton's moves forward are a little bit quicker now than they used to be. I don't know whether that's De Zerbi or whether that's just the evolution of what Potter left. But Chelsea looked happy to be beaten. And they seemingly accepted at 2-0 when sort of Loftus-Cheek sort of dangles a leg and then just deflects it into his own net. It's almost like a switch goes off there and you think, right, well, we've lost this game. And it's kind of hard to watch given the kind of the resources there. And it's particularly unusual when you've got a new manager because they came into the game unbeaten. And it was really, I don't know. Like I understand all the kind of the energy momentum is with Brighton and the crowd's kind of banging for Potter because they feel a little bit let down by him leaving, but also him ripping out the club's technical structure on his way out. I get that. But then there's a challenge there too for Chelsea. And it was really disappointing actually, because I was really looking forward to the game. I love watching Brighton. John talked about his long-term crush. I think one of my short-term crushes is Kara Mitoma, the Japanese winger that Brighton have. He's a lovely player. He's one of those guys that sort of, when he carries the ball, he kind of glides with it and he just unbalances defenders on either side. He's got a really nice, touch of pass and weight of pass. But I was kind of looking forward to it as a contest and it never really developed into one.
Yeah. Okay.
Go on, just to come back to Mitoma. It's interesting the way that Brighton are developing players. So Mitoma is a player who they bought from, I think it's Kawasaki Frontale in Japan, brought him over and then sent him on loan last season to Union Saint-Gallen Saint-Gallois,
Saint-Gallois,
yeah, in Belgium. And what they've done this with loads of players. So they bring them in from smaller leagues where there might be a big step up into the Premier League. They send them away for a season and bring them back, and they just seem ready-made for the Premier League. So they've done that with a number of different players now, and it's just a really decent way of developing players. So props to David Weir, I think is the loans manager over there at the moment. So yeah, they're doing a good job over there.
Yeah. David Weir, like the ex-Scotland defender. Cool.
There we go. So let me come back to you for 1 second, because you already mentioned that the Brighton home crowd seemed a little bit more than displeased with Graham Potter. A lot of booing. He was quite keen in the post-match interview afterwards, or at least he appeared to have felt that a little bit keenly, because he made the point of saying he doesn't think he's done anything wrong. And I sort of agree with him. I mean, is it okay for it to just be sort of part of the pantomime of football supporters and it's all meant in jest or whatever, or is it kind of ridiculous that he was booed like that?
Well, there's a different way of looking at it in that, yes, it was directed at Graham Potter, but I think what people are raging against is kind of one of the realities and truisms of modern football, which is that as soon as a big club takes a liking or a fancy to something that's shiny, they take it, and what's left. Okay, at the moment, De Zerbi looks like he might be a success, and stylistically, I'm really looking forward to what he might do at Brighton. I think he has a good chance of building on the work that's been done. At the same time, however, how many times in the past have you seen, right, we're going to take that manager now, and everything else can burn as a result because it's not our problem as the big club. And no, I got a lot of sympathy. I agree with Graham Potter in that he doesn't really have much to apologise for, because, of course, he was going to take that opportunity. For someone like that, with a non-traditional journey through football management, how often are you going to get the opportunity to manage a club like Chelsea, to earn what he's likely to earn there, to coach on that sort of stage? I get it, but it's okay to be annoyed about it, because this is one of the inequalities of the game, in that you can buy into a project. You can, goodness, what's it been like to be a Brighton fan in the past couple of years? It must have been wonderful to see, based on where the club were 20 years ago, what they've been through, and to see them playing the kind of football and winning the sort of admiration they are. And then because there's been a falling out or a disagreement between the new billionaire owner and the Champions League winning coach, you have to suffer. I get it. It's just part of football, and it's a horrible thing, but it's just unfortunate that Graham Potter is the target of it. I understand that too.
Pascal Gross is listed as playing at right back in this game. Is that correct?
Didn't feel like it.
Well, this is the thing. So it's one of these things where the team sheet doesn't actually represent what you see on the pitch.
Yeah.
Because there's no, formations are, they don't really exist in a lot of teams now. It's just players in different positions at different phases of play.
Don't say that before my next question, JJ, because my next question is that Sterling and Pulisic played at wing back. So I wanted to ask you about that, because it didn't seem to work. I think the fellas on Match of the Day noted also that this had been tried in the last sort of 3 games and had been sort of scrapped. Or maybe that was Mark Cucurella at left centre back, but something along these lines have been tried in the last few games and then sort of scrapped around half time or in the second half, as it wasn't really working. Sterling and Pulisic at wing back to me seems like the sort of thing I would have done on FIFA 10 years ago. Is it that weird, or what's the thinking behind it?
Well, you want to get all your best players on the pitch at the same time.
That was my FIFA thinking, yeah.
Yeah, but there is like thinking behind it. And the idea should be that if you think you can control the game, and I mean, Graham Potter obviously knows quite a lot about Brighton, so he could know where he could control the game and where he might get advantages. So you play Sterling and Pulisic on the wings, so they are your wide players to give you width out wide, obviously, which then creates space in the middle, hopefully, for your boxman field that they've got there. And it changes from, it's a different defensive shape to when they're in attack. Obviously, in defence, you don't really want Raheem Sterling as your left wing back or your left back, but he's not really. It's Mark Cucurella. So, and the thing you saw them then get taken out a little bit was that this is a team learning how to play Potter's style against one that had already. No, they're deviating it from it now. But Cucurella and Chalobah coming very far out of where they're supposed to try and help overload the midfield part of the pitch. But then that leaves space out wide for someone else, and then maybe Pulisic and Sterling aren't quite aligned with tactically what they're supposed to be doing right now. And if you can take advantage of that and you're super motivated, that you can't really get a more motivated team than you would get that Brighton team against Chelsea. Like the manager's coming back, the crowd are right up against it. You've got that massive advantage straight away. So you do have, looks like a team who wants it more against another one. Like Chelsea don't care that much about playing against Brighton. They're not expecting that to be a huge, massive battle.
Yeah.
It's basically Potter versus Brighton. It's not really Chelsea. They don't, that doesn't really matter. So I think that gives them a bit of an advantage there. Tactically, when you get these players in, it should mean that you have more of the ball. You've got those great players in attacking positions, and then you've got Chalobah and Cucurella on either side of the centre back. So you should sort of be fine. But then, like John's saying, I mean, the first goal is a bit of a stramash in the box, and Trossard does really well. Trossard, who's playing as a wing back under Potter, now playing as a central striker here, with Pascal Gross listed at right back. Weird. And then 2 own goals. So it's really kind of unfortunate. So although the XG does show that Brighton were way ahead in this game, like by quite a lot.
Yes.
It's just one of those. I think it's just one of those that happens now and again.
The wing back thing was really interesting because there's a couple of times, particularly in the first half, where you saw Sterling carry the ball through the middle. Pulisic also, like, the XG point is valid, but Chelsea had a couple of really good chances. Sanchez made 2 really good saves in the first half. Pulisic spooned one wide when he probably definitely should have hit the target. But like, it felt to me initially, at least, like the wing backs were a kind of a pragmatic approach to dealing with Brighton's strength at wing back. And then Pervis Estepan was probably the best player on the pitch from the left. Like, he was the most progressive. Like, he was kind of a force in the game down that side.
Well, this is it. It's the thinking, right, Seb? So if you play attacking wing backs, but you play them as wingers, that's what they're not wing backs, they're wingers.
Yeah.
It's like that old like Cruyff Ajax team, maybe. So the wingers, the wide players are actually just wingers. They're meant to be up top in line with the striker a lot of the time. So that you can control the game that way. And how do you want to defend? Is it deeper, or do you want to defend higher up the pitch? And if you've got those players up there helping with the press, and you've got a box midfield, which is Mount, Gallagher, Kovacic and Loftus-Cheek, control in the middle of the pitch. In theory, you've got real control there. So you've got a back 3 with 2 protecting them. Then the 2 wide wing backs should really be wingers, which gives you more of an attacking over defence kind of mentality, which may be high risk, but you've got better players. Like Chelsea have much better players than Brighton do. And so they should be able to control it more. And Potter knows roughly how they're going to try and build, so where you can control the game there. But it just takes a couple of little errors for that to fall apart. And then once you're 2-0 down, it's really difficult to then, because you naturally, the team who's the lesser talented team, obviously they're a good team, Brighton, but Chelsea have better players. So then they can just sit and they can play in a different sort of way against them. It changes the way the game's managed in that. It might not work just now with the players you've got at that positions, but then you think, like, he was playing Trossard, who is really a forward, as a wing back all the time. That's what Potter was doing. So why couldn't Sterling do that? Why couldn't Pulisic do it?
Sure.
I think they've got a problem with Sterling insofar as they've just spent £50 million on him.
Yeah, me too.
And the big question is, where do you fit him into this team? And we've seen him try to play it. We've seen Potter try to play him as an outside forward, but obviously the outside forwards that Potter likes to play end up being quite narrow, as you've already said. Like, they are playing a box midfield. You've got someone like Mason Mount. He's really good to play in that sort of situation, and Sterling's usually just played on the other side. So yeah, I think the idea is that you drop him into those wing back positions because it allows you to play to his upside a little bit more, which is running into space or getting in behind wide players. Yeah, it's just not happening so much for him at the moment. Whether or not that's because the team aren't building up the way that Potter wants them to and getting into those sorts of situations. I'm really struggling to take you seriously with a skeleton hanging off you.
For listeners, you won't be able to see this, but you can hear that JJ has a skeleton's arm around his shoulder there. That's what John...
I got the skeleton in the studio.
I keep looking up and he's just sitting there innocently looking at me with a skeleton's arm around his shoulder, so I apologise.
Go on, Seb.
No, it just felt at times like all the points that John's made are fair. I just wonder whether playing Sterling at wing back is a little bit about, if you think about sort of the forward components at Chelsea, so someone like Aubameyang, whose tendency is always to move either from left to right or left to inside, or from central positions and kind of drop a little bit wide. What you have with Sterling is someone that's just super comfortable getting into the penalty box. Like if you think about the kind of classic goal he'd score at Manchester City, he was a exclamation point, wasn't he? He would get on the end of moves. And so you've injected that into the formation, but then it feels like you've outthought yourself, because as a result of the stuff that you don't have, i.e. the focal point, the big number 9 that you kind of could play around and operate around, you need a kind of compensatory piece to accommodate, I don't know, Aubameyang's movement. Havertz is, a pretty decent false 9, but he's not a number 9, is he? And he doesn't have the positional tendencies of a number 9. And so you kind of have this betwixt and between situation where Sterling plays as a wing back, but he doesn't offer you the things that you need from it in this game, which is to kind of restrict someone like Purvis Esteban. Love saying his first name, Purvis. There aren't enough Purvises.
Purvis Estupinian.
Purvis.
I would like to say Havertz did a pretty good impression of a number 9 with that headed goal, though, didn't he? Congratulations to him.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. There are journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.